protesting on an empty stomach. Any number of political and social factors underpins the current unrest in Egypt, and as always, economics figures in. The upheaval has shined a light on two serious problems facing the country. Most jobs pay too little, and most food costs too much. The primary reason for rioting and civil unrest in Egypt has been a huge run-up in food costs in recent months. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the worldwide food price index is at an all-time high, surpassing its 2008 peak, when skyrocketing costs caused global rioting and pushed as many as 64 million people into poverty. The price of oils, sugar, and cereals have all recently hit new peaks. And those latter prices are especially troubling for Egypt, as the world's biggest importer of wheat. Egyptians are particularly vulnerable to increases in food prices because they spend an unusually high portion of their income on food, according to a recent Credit Suisse survey. Food inflation is a specific issue in the country, the report notes, having reached over 20% amongst the highest rates globally. Egyptians spent more on food than respondents in any other emerging economy surveyed in the report, about 40% of their monthly income, versus about 17% for Brazilians and about 20% for Chinese and Saudi Arabians, for instance. Although it is true the average American family currently spends only 13% of their total annual expenditures on food compared to 34% of their expenditures on housing, NIA projects that by the year 2015 the average American family will be spending as much as 40% of their total annual expenditures on food and as little as 10% on housing. As the Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars out of thin air to monetize bad U.S. mortgage-related debts, Americans will be able to pay off their mortgages with depreciated U.S. dollars, but all of the newly created monetary inflation will gravitate toward food and drive food prices through the roof because everybody needs to eat and there are major food shortages. NIA is 100% confident that the violence in Egypt today over food inflation will spread to the U.S. later this decade when the U.S. dollar becomes worthless and Americans can no longer take food for granted. China's central bank says Fed easing ineffective and dangerous. Quantitative easing by the Federal Reserve and other central banks cannot address fundamental economic problems, but may lead to excessive global liquidity and competitive currency depreciation, China's central bank said on Sunday. The central bank said the Fed's monetary easing was pushing up international commodity prices and asset prices in emerging markets, including China. Quote, "Quantitative easing policy cannot fundamentally address economic problems, and it may cause excessive liquidity on a global scale, as well as risk of competitive currency depreciation," the Chinese central bank said in its 59-page report. It is creating imported inflation and short-term capital inflows, pressuring emerging markets, it said. Sure, the Fed's quantitative easing is dangerous to China if they keep their currency peg and continue propping up the U.S. dollar. However, China has no need to participate in the competitive currency depreciation. When China finally decides to pull the plug on the U.S. dollar and U.S. economy, which is currently on life support, the value of the yuan will go through the roof and the Chinese will buy up all American assets for pennies on the dollar. Say hello to Mr. Wang, your new boss at McDonald's. He's proud to introduce the new McSushi sandwich as part of a new $1 million value menu. Lonely analyst warns of 2015 bank crisis amid upbeat Davos. As politicians, executives, and financiers networked at parties and panels last week in Davos, Switzerland, Barry Wilkinson was in a nearby hotel warning that a 2015 financial catastrophe may be looming. The fundamentals haven't been addressed at all. The things that caused the previous crisis, loose monetary policy, and trade imbalances, they're actually bigger now than they were then. In the caste system of the World Economic Forum's annual event in the Swiss ski resort, Wilkinson was at the bottom rung, with an identification badge that denied him access to most sessions and sorries. His message clashed with the optimistic tone of many at the center of the meeting who were eager to emphasize the progress made after 2 years of hand-wringing in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis. NIA agrees with Wilkinson and warned in March of last year that rising interest payments on our national debt, along with increased government health care and entitlement spending, will just about guarantee that the U.S. will see hyperinflation by the year 2015. The loneliness Wilkinson is experiencing in Davos is similar to the loneliness all NIA members are experiencing in the U.S. As NIA members continue to become educated to the truth about the U.S. economy and inflation, most of our friends still have their heads in the clouds, wasting away their days watching American Idol and Jersey Shore when they should be working to accumulate precious metals and begin their own food storage. Unfortunately, most of our friends won't wake up until the rest of the herd does, and at that time they will likely flock like sheep to $5,000 per ounce gold and $500 per ounce silver. Even more millionaires defaulting on mortgages. The Reality Track organization predicted earlier this month that home foreclosures in 2011 will likely exceed the record 3.8 million reported in 2010. CBS News correspondent John Blackstone reports one group of mortgage defaulters seems to be bucking the trend. In wealthy communities like La Jolla, California, living near the ocean is a privilege that many homeowners are willing to pay millions for. For Darren Thomas, that ocean view was quickly losing its value. Thomas bought his townhome in 2006, but after seeing its value drop steadily, he stopped paying. Thomas has gone into strategic default. He could make payments, but is refusing to put more money into a home that is worth less than his mortgage. Among luxury homeowners, he is not alone. 1 in 7 homeowners with loans of over $1 million are seriously delinquent compared to 1 in 12 with mortgages below $1 million. The more you owe, it seems the better off you may be. Darren Thomas continues to live in his home because banks are often slower to foreclose on million-dollar homes. In Huntington Beach, California, realtors say banks can be slow to foreclose on luxury homes because an empty house can be bad for everyone's bottom line. For those who have stopped paying their million-dollar mortgages, it's just an investment that didn't work out. When it comes to real estate, the rich are different. They can be just as ruthless as bankers. So let me get this straight. Not only did banks allow Americans with no jobs to buy multi-million-dollar homes that they had no way of making the payments for, but now they are allowing them to stay in these homes for many years rent-free, which means that the responsible neighbors who can afford to make their payments are now deciding that they'd rather spend their $10,000 per month on jewelry, electronics, clothing, and vacations, knowing full well that they won't be kicked out of their house anytime soon. This is complete insanity. A new round of debt defaults is ahead that will result in the Federal Reserve implementing quantitative easing to infinity.